I had been on the road for almost 14 hours straight, hauling a load of frozen poultry from the Midwest down toward the Gulf Coast. It was late February, the kind of night where the air feels sharp against your skin, even through the heater in the cab. The highway was empty, a long stretch of black asphalt that seemed to melt into the horizon. My rig's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the occasional road sign and the dull glint of the guardrails. But beyond that, there was nothing, just the faint outline of trees and the low, rolling shapes of hills. I kept a steady 70, my hands gripping the wheel, knuckles white beneath my worn gloves. The radio was tuned low, just static and the occasional late-night talk show host rambling about politics or sports. I wasn't listening, though. I was thinking about how the road changes when you drive it alone at night. There's a rhythm to it, a slow pulse you get used to, the hum of the tires on the asphalt, the occasional rumble of the engine, the way the truck shifts under its own weight when you take a curve. Those are the only sounds you trust. Anything outside of that, anything unexpected, sticks out. That's when the road feels alive and, in a way, hostile. I passed the last way station hours ago, a cluster of empty lights fading behind me. The highway stretched on in straight, empty lines. Every mile marker I passed was a reminder of how far I was from anything resembling help. I checked the mirrors out of habit. Nothing but the dark, the faint outline of roadside trees, and the glimmer of my own headlights on the paint of the truck. I told myself I was just tired, that my eyes were playing tricks, but a knot had formed in my stomach. It wasn't fear yet, not really. It was awareness, the kind you get when you're alone on a road where nobody should be. Somewhere around the 120-mile mark, I noticed a shadow moving along the side of the highway. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a deer, but it didn't jump. It didn't run. It stayed in the periphery, just a dark, human-shaped smear against the blackness. I slowed a little, eased the rig toward the shoulder, but the shadow didn't move away. It didn't even seem startled. My pulse picked up, and I tightened my grip on the wheel. I told myself it was someone walking along the road, someone who'd been out for a walk or maybe had car trouble back down the way. But the road behind me had been empty for miles. No lights, no signs of life. Only that shadow, staying with me, almost matching my speed without ever actually moving forward or back. It was impossible. I tried to focus on the road ahead, to ignore it. The cab was quiet except for the hum of the engine and the faint creak of the rig as it shifted over the uneven pavement. I passed over a long bridge, steel girders rising out of the darkness, the river below reflecting nothing but black. That's when I caught the first glimpse of something more concrete. A figure standing just at the edge of the bridge. No movement, just standing, perfectly still. I blinked and it was closer. I had been driving for miles, and it had somehow moved to match me, though I had never seen it step off the shoulder or leave the shadows. My chest tightened. This was no animal, no wanderer. The logic didn't make sense, and my mind was fighting itself between rational thought and instinctive terror. I increased speed slightly, hands sweating on the wheel. My headlights caught the figure again, and this time it seemed to split, two shapes now, one on either side of the highway, though I hadn't passed any exit or median. My heart pounded, every instinct telling me to stop, to call someone, to do something, but there was nothing. No cars, no phones, no help. Only me and the rig and the darkness. I passed a truck stop sign, a small neon glow ahead, and I felt a surge of relief. Place with people. A place where someone could see me. I could pull in, check my load, maybe just get a hot coffee. But when I reached the turnoff, there was no truck stop. The road curved gently, and the sign I had seen was gone, swallowed by the black. The sense of isolation doubled, and I realized I hadn't seen another car for hours. Not one. The roads were too empty, the night too quiet. I focused on the road, forcing my hands to unclench. I told myself it had to be fatigue, that I was seeing things, projecting shapes onto the dark. But then the lights of a vehicle appeared in my rearview mirror. Bright, low-beamed, far off at first but rapidly approaching. I had been driving straight for an hour, and suddenly there was another set of headlights behind me. The highway had been empty. I glanced again, hoping it was a normal truck, a driver catching up, but the shape didn't fit. It wasn't a truck. It was lower, wider, and it didn't overtake me. It just stayed there, in my mirrors, relentless. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was another semi, just far enough behind to look odd in the mirrors. But the feeling in my gut wouldn't let me lie to myself. Hours passed. The night crawled on, the road unchanging except for the faint shimmer of moonlight on the asphalt. Eventually, as dawn broke, the first hints of gray light stretching over the hills, I saw a small town off the interstate. Gas station, diner, motel. I pulled in slowly, shaking, exhausted. My hands trembled as I killed the engine. I stepped out of the cab and looked back at the highway, the long black line I had been following for hours. Empty. Not a single vehicle, not a single shadow, no signs of the shapes that had been there. The reality of the morning was almost jarring in its calm. I checked my rig, my load, everything. Perfectly normal. I sat in the truck, running the heater, drinking black coffee from a styrofoam cup, still trembling. No one had followed me in. No one was waiting. Nothing tangible remained. I never saw what it was. I don't know if it was a person or something else entirely, but I learned that night that driving alone on an empty highway, under the weight of darkness, makes you see things differently. Your mind, your instincts, every sense you rely on can stretch the truth into something that feels dangerously real. I didn't get answers, but I learned to trust the rhythm of the road and the quiet awareness that the night can be alive in ways you don't understand until you've been out there, alone, for 14 hours with nothing but headlights and shadows to keep you company. I had been driving long haul for nearly a decade, mostly on the interstate corridors that cut through the Midwest and South. The rhythm of the road, the hum of the engine, the occasional flash of a distant taillight, it all became a kind of meditation, a pattern I could rely on when the world off the asphalt felt uncertain. That spring, I had taken a run from St. Louis down toward the Gulf, hauling a refrigerated load of produce. It was late March, the nights still cold enough to bite through thin gloves, and I preferred those empty hours. The highways were nearly deserted by the time the sun dipped low, and the only sound was the engine and the occasional rustle of the wind. The stretch I remember most vividly was somewhere south of Jackson, Mississippi. I was driving past a long, flat expanse of farmland, the kind that seems to stretch forever, bordered by a few scattered trees that bent under the wind. The sky was a muted orange from the fading sun, streaked with gray clouds that promised rain. I had been on the road for almost 12 hours straight, but my eyelids weren't heavy yet. I was careful about stopping too early in the rural parts. Some areas just didn't feel right at night. I kept my attention tight on the road, eyes flicking from the lanes to the mirrors, noting the distance between me and the next exit. That's when I noticed the other truck. It appeared suddenly in my rearview mirror, a big rig with no markings, plain white except for a faint stripe of dirt running along its side. It didn't pass me. It just stayed there, same distance behind, tail lights glowing faintly in the dimming light. At first, I didn't think much of it. Trucks follow each other all the time. I kept my pace steady, shifting gears smoothly, keeping my distance from the few cars on the road. But as the miles stretched, I realized the truck hadn't turned off or passed. It stayed just behind, following my movements exactly, matching my speed when I slowed for curves or acceleration for the long straights. There was nothing about the driver I could see. No cab details, nothing, just the glowing red rectangles of the tail lights, mirrored in my mirrors as I adjusted my view. I checked the exit signs. I had options. A rest area was coming up in about 10 miles, a small pull-off with lights and a vending machine, a place where I could pause, stretch, and shake off the tension. But as I signaled and slowed down to take the exit, the truck mirrored me, as if it had been waiting. It didn't move past, didn't slow too early. It just stayed perfectly behind, adjusting as I adjusted, sliding in the lane beside me at one point to make sure I saw the driver's side. Empty cab. I scanned the darkened windows, blinking, trying to convince myself it was a reflection or a trick of the fading light. But the mirrors told the truth. There was no one. The pull-off came up faster than I expected. I eased the rig onto the gravel, the tires crunching in a way that made me tense. The white truck followed, parked behind me, engine off. I sat in my cab, hands gripping the wheel, watching the mirrors. Minutes passed. Nothing moved. The night pressed in, heavy and quiet, and the sound of the wind outside seemed too loud. I thought of the radio, but even the CB was quiet. Not a signal, not a crackle, just silence. I debated leaving again, moving slowly, hoping that driving would dissolve the tension. Then the headlights flicked on briefly, a single flash as if signaling me, and that was enough to convince me to make a plan. I waited, calculating. If I left in reverse, I risked something worse. If I drove forward, it could follow again. I decided to time the stop with the next major intersection, hoping the presence of lights and other vehicles might break whatever pattern this truck was keeping. I pulled back onto the highway, merging carefully, watching the truck respond instantly, matching my speed, gliding behind with precision. I counted exits in my head. 1, 2, 3. At the fourth exit, I planned to take the off-ramp sharply, weave into the frontage road, and hope that familiarity with the network of small roads would let me lose it. As I exited, the truck didn't hesitate. It followed, hugging the curve, maintaining distance, and that's when the weight of the situation hit me fully. It wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. The truck had been tracking me for miles, and now I had to make a decision quickly. I took the frontage road, turning sharply at the first intersecting street, barely slowing, tires skimming gravel. The truck followed exactly. My mind raced. I knew the next town was a few miles ahead, a place with lights and people, a chance to pull into a populated parking lot and confront, or at least shake, the driver. I pushed the rig to maintain control while navigating the narrow turns. Then, just as the main street opened up with diners and gas stations visible, the truck slowed and turned off onto a side road, disappearing as quietly as it had appeared. The sudden absence was almost as unsettling as its presence. I didn't relax until I pulled into the nearest truck stop, lights glaring, trucks parked all around, people moving about. The normalcy of the place felt almost violent after what I'd just experienced. I spent the night there, parked at the far end of the lot, engine running for warmth, eyes glued to the mirrors. Nothing came. No sign of the white truck. I slept little, alert, listening to the distant hum of refrigeration units and the occasional conversation. By dawn, I left cautiously, glancing over my shoulder every few minutes. The memory of the precision, the way it mirrored me, stayed with me for weeks. I never saw the truck again. It was as if it had been a phantom of the highway, a reminder of how isolated and exposed you can be on these roads, how even in something as familiar as long-haul driving, control can be an illusion. From then on, I kept a strict routine of exits, stops, and check-ins, never underestimating the emptiness of the night and the possibility of someone, or something, tracking every mile. I was 26 when I got my CDL. I had been driving box trucks for a furniture company before that, daytime routes, home every night. Getting hired by a regional freight carrier felt like stepping into something bigger. Sleeper cab, overnight runs, tight delivery windows. I wanted to prove I could handle it. Most of the older drivers said nights separate the ones who last from the ones who quit. That run started in eastern Oklahoma with a drive-in full of paper goods headed toward western Arkansas. Nothing heavy, nothing unusual. I had already been on duty close to 10 hours by the time I crossed the state line. The highway was empty except for the occasional set of headlights drifting past in the opposite lanes. The dash lights cast a dull green glow across the gauges. The hum of the engine and the steady vibration through the steering column had settled into my bones. By 3:30 a.m., my eyes felt grainy. Not falling asleep, but close enough that I knew I needed a break. There was a small rest area ahead that I had seen on the route map during orientation. Not a truck stop. No fuel island, just parking and bathrooms. I took the exit and rolled down the ramp, air brakes sighing when I eased off the throttle. The lot was mostly empty. Sodium vapor lights buzzed overhead, throwing yellow pools onto cracked pavement. I counted spaces automatically as I circled once. There was only one other truck parked along the far row. An older Freightliner, dark blue or black, Hard to tell in that light. It was backed into a spot near the trees. Engine off. No marker lights. No glow from inside the cab. I parked 2 rows over, nose facing the exit. I have always preferred that. Easier to pull out fast if needed. I set the brakes, killed the headlights, and let the engine idle for a minute before shutting it down. The sudden quiet pressed in on me. When the motor stops after hours of driving, your ears ring. The metal around you ticks and pops as it cools. I scanned the mirrors before closing the curtains. The Freightliner was still there. No movement. No one walking around it. I did not see any cars. No RVs. Just us. I climbed into the sleeper, pulled off my boots, and lay back fully clothed. I keep my phone on the small shelf above my pillow and my keys hooked near the bunk. I remember thinking I would rest for 20 minutes, maybe 30, then get moving again. I did not feel unsafe, just tired. 10 minutes later, I heard a sound that did not fit the quiet. At first, I thought it was something settling in the cab. A faint tick against metal. Then it came again, sharper. Tap. Not random. It came from the driver's side door. I froze. When you live in a truck, you know every normal noise. Wind against the mirrors. A trailer shifting. This was not that. It was controlled. Fingertips or knuckles touching the door. I stayed still, listening. The tapping returned. Light at first, then firmer. The pattern changed into knocking. 3 knocks closed together. Pause. 3 more. My heart started to pound so hard I could feel it in my throat. I did not move toward the door. I did not reach for the handle. I slid one hand up and nudged the curtain half an inch, just enough to see down toward the driver's side. A man stood there, close enough that his shoulder almost brushed the mirror. He was not wearing a reflective vest. No flashlight, no hat, dark jacket, jeans. His face was turned slightly down, eyes fixed on the door handle. He was not looking around the lot. He was not looking up toward the sleeper window. He stood too still. I searched the lot beyond him with that narrow view. The older Freightliner was still parked where I had seen it. No other vehicles. No movement near the restrooms. He lifted his hand and wrapped it around the driver's door handle. He pulled. The whole cab shook with the force. The lock held, but the vibration ran through the frame. He pulled again, harder, like he expected it to open. There was no hesitation, no checking if someone was inside. He knew someone was in there. He had walked directly to my door. Adrenaline cut through the fatigue. I reached forward and hit the air horn. The blast filled the cab and the lot outside. It echoed off the concrete barriers and trees. My chest felt the vibration. He stepped back 1 pace, not startled the way most people would be, not shielding his ears. He lowered his hand and looked up toward the windshield, not directly at me, just at the front of the truck. His expression was flat. Then he turned and walked between the rows of empty spaces toward the Freightliner. He did not run. He did not hurry. I grabbed my phone and called state police. My voice sounded steady in my own ears, even though my hands were shaking. I gave them the mile marker, the direction, the description of the man, the other truck. They said a unit would head that way. While I waited, I kept watching through a small gap in the curtain. The area where the Freightliner had been was partly hidden by my trailer, but I could see enough of the row to know if headlights came on. No lights came on. After maybe a minute, I eased the curtain open wider. The spot where the Freightliner had been was empty. There was no engine sound, no crunch of gravel, no sweep of headlights leaving the lot. The truck was simply gone. The space behind it showed bare pavement and the line markings. My first thought was that I had misjudged the angle. I leaned over the bunk and checked the passenger side mirror. Nothing there either. The entire far row was clear. I stayed locked in the cab. Doors secured. Windows up. Every few seconds I scanned the mirrors. The trees behind the lot were still. No shapes moving between them. The police cruiser pulled in about 40 minutes later. Lights off until the last second. The officer parked near my front bumper and walked up. I climbed down only after he was standing there with his flashlight out. I pointed to the spot where the Freightliner had been. I described the man again, his height, build, clothing. The officer checked the lot, the restrooms, the tree line. He found no other trucks. He said no calls had come in from that rest area about a disabled vehicle or another driver. He looked at the pavement where I said the Freightliner had parked. There were faint tire marks, but nothing fresh enough to stand out. He told me sometimes drivers use rest areas for quick meetups or to transfer cargo. Sometimes they leave fast if they think police are coming. He did not say it was nothing. He just said there was no one there now. After he left, I did not climb back into the sleeper. I started the engine and pulled out, hands tight on the wheel. I drove the remaining 2 hours to a truck stop near the delivery point and parked under bright canopy lights with other rigs idling around me. Later that week, I asked dispatch if there had been any reports of thefts in that corridor. They mentioned a few incidents where drivers had woken up to someone trying door handles at small rest areas. No forced entries, but attempts. That is the part that settled it for me. The man was not confused. He was checking for unlocked cabs. Maybe looking for cash, electronics, anything easy to grab. The older Freightliner could have been his ride, parked dark to blend in. When he heard the horn and realized I was awake and calling attention, he likely moved fast and quiet, lights off until he was clear of the lot. From inside my cab, with the engine off and my heart pounding, I would not have heard another diesel start up 50 yards away. There was nothing supernatural about it. Just someone testing doors at nearly 4 in the morning, counting on tired drivers to forget a lock. I do not stop at isolated rest areas anymore. If I am pushing my hours and need sleep, I plan for a truck stop with cameras and traffic. I keep my doors locked before I even set the brakes. I trust my mirrors. I trust the sound of my own horn. I would rather drive tired under highway lights than wake up to someone's hand on my door again. I had been driving long haul for 11 years when this happened. Late October, I was running a refrigerated load of packaged salad from Salinas to a distribution center outside Denver. Nothing unusual about it. The trailer had been preloaded and sealed before I hooked to it. The bill of lading matched the seal number. Temperature set at 34 degrees. I checked the unit, signed the paperwork, and pulled out just before dusk. The first few hours were normal. Traffic thinned past Bakersfield. The sky turned a dull red behind the hills. I settled into the steady rhythm of the engine and the hum from the reefer unit behind me. Around 9 that night, I stopped at a truck stop off I-15 to fuel and grab coffee. I walked around the rig like always. Tires looked good. Seal intact. No damage to the doors. I remember noticing how cold the trailer walls felt when I brushed past them. The unit was cycling correctly. Back on the road, the wind picked up crossing into Nevada. Pushed against the trailer hard enough that I kept both hands on the wheel. Around midnight, I started hearing a dull thud from behind me. It was faint and irregular. At first I thought cargo had shifted, but salad boxes are packed tight on pallets and shrink-wrapped. They do not move like that. The sound came again after a few miles. One knock, then silence. I turned off the radio and listened. The engine noise and wind made it hard to tell where it came from. I checked the mirrors, half expecting to see a strap loose or a panel flapping. Everything looked fine. I told myself it was road vibration. Still, the timing felt off. The knock did not match bumps in the pavement. Another half hour passed before it happened again. 2 quick thuds this time. Not loud, but solid. Carried through the frame of the truck. A tight feeling settled in my chest. I looked at the temperature monitor mounted on the dash. 35 degrees inside the trailer. Normal range. I drove another 20 miles before taking the next exit. It was a small rest area with only 2 other trucks parked under weak yellow lights. I shut down the engine but left the reefer running. The night air was sharp and dry. I walked slowly toward the back of the trailer, listening. The unit droned steady. No other sound. The metal doors were cold enough to sting my hand. The seal was still there. No signs of tampering. I stood still for almost a full minute. Then I heard it clearly. A scrape from inside. Not the shifting of freight. It was uneven, dragging across cardboard. My first thought was animals. But the trailer had been sealed at the shipper. There was no way for anything to get in after that. The scrape came again, followed by a heavy knock against the door from the inside. Not hard enough to bend metal, but strong. My hands went numb. I stepped back. Someone was inside. I went straight to the cab and called Highway Patrol. I gave them my location and explained what I heard. They told me to stay outside the vehicle and wait. Those 15 minutes felt longer than any winter chain up in the mountains. Every few seconds there was movement from the trailer. Slow thuds, scratching. Once something hit the door twice in a row. The patrol car arrived with lights off. The officer parked behind my rig and walked up. I showed him the seal and the paperwork. He circled the trailer with a flashlight. The noise had stopped by then, which made it worse. He called for backup before cutting the seal. When the second unit arrived, they positioned themselves on either side of the doors. One officer sliced the plastic seal and swung the right door open fast. Cold air spilled out in a white cloud. For a second, I saw only stacked pallets. Then I noticed a gap near the front wall where 2 rows did not line up. A person crawled out from that space. He was young, maybe early 20s, thin, wearing a hoodie and jeans. His skin looked pale under the flashing lights. His lips were blue from the cold. He could barely stand. The officers pulled him down carefully and laid him on the asphalt. He was shivering hard. An ambulance came within 10 minutes. The paramedics wrapped him in blankets and put him inside to warm up. One officer asked me to walk through the trailer with him. We climbed up and shined our lights along the pallets. Several boxes had been torn open to create a hollow space. There were empty water bottles and a small backpack wedged between the stacks. The officer explained what likely happened. The load had sat in a staging yard for several hours before I picked it up. The yard was large and not fully fenced. It would not have been hard for someone to climb in while the trailer doors were open during loading or while it was parked waiting for paperwork. Once inside, he must have hidden between pallets before the doors were sealed. The temperature setting made the situation dangerous fast. At 34 degrees, hypothermia can set in within hours without proper clothing. He probably waited until we were deep into the desert before trying to get attention. The first knocks I heard were weak. By the time I stopped, he had been inside for close to 6 hours. The officers later told me he admitted to trying to hitch a ride east. He had no plan beyond getting out of California. No criminal record, no warrants. Just desperate and careless. The pallets near the front had shifted slightly from his movement, which explained the dull thuds I heard while driving. The scraping was him trying to push boxes aside to reach the door. There was no damage to the trailer itself. The refrigeration unit had kept running as designed. After statements were taken, they allowed me to reseal the doors with a new numbered seal and continue. I lost 3 hours that night. I did not mind. The rest of the drive to Denver was quiet. Every normal sound felt different. Each time the reefer cycled, I checked the mirrors. When I finally backed into the dock at the distribution center, I broke the seal with a steady hand and watched as workers unloaded the pallets. The gap at the front was obvious once you knew where to look. I still think about how close it came to ending worse. If I had ignored the sound and pushed through to Utah before stopping, he might not have lasted. The cold in a refrigerated trailer is constant and unforgiving. There is no insulation for a body wedged between cardboard and plastic wrap. Since then, I inspect preloaded trailers longer than required. I tap on the walls. I listen before pulling away. Freight moves across the country every night, sealed and silent. Most of the time it carries only goods. That night it carried a person who almost froze because he believed a locked trailer was a safe way to travel. I had been driving the route between Dallas and Minneapolis for almost 8 hours when I started noticing the changes in the road. It was mid-October, and the sun was low, sharp and pale, slicing through the windshield at an angle that made the horizon look too bright and the asphalt too dark. My rig was a standard 18-wheeler, a 2016 Freightliner with a sleeper I rarely used except for short naps. I'd left the truck stop near Waco before dawn, and the route was familiar, but something about that stretch of I-35 felt off. The lines on the road seemed to blur just at the edges of my vision, like the paint had been washed away, even though the asphalt was clean. I had been running on coffee and a few hours of sleep the night before. My body was alert but wired in a way that made shadows deeper and sounds sharper. The hum of the tires on the concrete, the occasional rumble of a semi passing by, and the faint whine of my own rig filled the cab. The radio was dead. Nothing but static when I flicked through the AM stations, which made the isolation feel heavier. The closer I got to the northern stretch past Kansas City, the less traffic I saw. It wasn't deserted, but trucks were sparse and cars fewer still. The empty stretches of road started to feel longer, like the miles themselves were dragging behind me. I glanced at the roadside markers, one every half mile, and noticed that some of them had numbers that seemed wrong. Mile marker 191.2, 191.3, 191.4, but then suddenly 191.7. My eyes felt tired, but I double-checked. The spacing didn't make sense. I slowed slightly, trying to rationalize it. Maybe the markers had been replaced recently, maybe the numbering was off. Nothing to panic over. I told myself that. The overpasses started to feel low, unnaturally low, and the shadows of the beams stretched across my lane in ways that made my brain hesitate. I checked my mirrors reflexively, half expecting a car to be hiding in the blind spots, then remembered I was alone. I hadn't seen another rig for miles. The wind had picked up, a dry gust that rattled the cab and made the trailer sway just a little more than it should. My knuckles were white on the wheel, and I could feel the sweat cool along my spine. It was around 7:30 p.m. when I pulled into a rest stop that wasn't on my usual route. I didn't need gas, but my eyes were tired, my body twitchy from the long drive, and I needed a break. The lot was nearly empty. One other truck was parked at the far end, lights off, as if the driver had been sleeping for hours. I took a quick walk around the cab, stretching my legs, listening to the wind through the steel and concrete of the lot. The smell of diesel and cold asphalt hung in the air. There was something in the way the shadows fell from the street lamps that made the space feel narrower than it was, compressed. Back in the cab, I tried to shake the feeling. I had miles to go, deadlines to meet, and this stretch wasn't out of the ordinary. I pulled back onto the interstate and turned on the headlights. The road ahead seemed to darken immediately after the beam, like the night was thicker there, heavier. My fatigue sharpened every movement, the sway of the trailer, the thrum of the tires, the subtle vibrations in the steering wheel. Everything was alive. I kept checking the mirrors, noticing the faint reflection of something at the edge of the trailer, something that looked like movement, but when I blinked it was gone. By the time I hit the bridge over the Missouri River, it was fully dark. I had that hollow feeling in my chest, the one that crawls up when a road seems to stretch on forever without end. My radio remained dead. My phone was almost out of signal, and the lanes were almost empty. The bridge was long, the metal girders casting sharp shadows across the cab floor. My rig felt heavier over the expansion joints, as if the vibrations were feeding into the frame and into me. Then I saw it. Something on the road ahead. A dark figure crouched near the right lane, just outside the glare of the headlights. My first thought was a person, a hitchhiker maybe, but the position was strange, low, still like a part of the road itself. I slowed instinctively, gripping the wheel, but the rig didn't respond as quickly as I wanted. The trailer swayed slightly. The figure didn't move. I realized it was a large animal, probably a deer, but its eyes reflected the headlights in a way that made them seem human. My pulse accelerated. I braked lightly, enough to slow but not lock, trying to calculate a path. The deer, or whatever it was, didn't move. I eased around it, heart hammering, feeling every vibration through the steering column. Once past, I checked the mirrors. Nothing. The road was empty again, perfectly normal. I kept driving, but the tension stayed. Every rustle in the trees, every shadow, every reflection off the guardrail made me flinch. I made it to a truck stop near Des Moines a few hours later. I parked under a bright light, shut the engine, and finally let my body relax. I checked the logs. No accidents reported, no warnings. Whatever I had seen on that bridge was gone, and the rest of the drive passed without incident. The next day, I called the company and reported the strange mile markers and the figure on the bridge. The dispatcher told me the bridge had a history of wildlife collisions and that sometimes the markers get replaced after construction. Everything made sense, but it didn't erase the feeling of being followed, the tension of that night, the way my rig felt alive in the dark. I knew that stretch of highway now in a way I wouldn't forget, and I also knew that I would never drive it at night the same way again. The road had tested me, and I had passed through, but it left me alert, aware, and uneasy in a way that sleep, distance, and explanation couldn't undo. October 2019. I was running nights out of Albuquerque, headed west on Interstate 40 toward Flagstaff. That stretch past Gallup never bothered me. Long, straight, open desert. You can see headlights 10 miles out on a clear night. The pay was better after dark, and I preferred fewer cars. Less merging, fewer brake lights, fewer four-wheelers drifting in and out of lanes. I left the yard a little after midnight. Load was dry goods, sealed trailer, nothing unusual. Weather report said clear skies, low wind. The air had that sharp desert cold that settles in after sunset. By the time I crossed into Arizona and looped back east toward Gallup for a drop, the clock on my dash read 2:17 a.m. The fog started without warning, not a gradual fade. 1 mile I could see stars and distant taillights. The next, the road ahead turned gray. It sat low, hugging the asphalt, like steam coming off hot pavement after rain, except it hadn't rained. It wasn't drifting across the highway. It was fixed there, flat and thick. My headlights caught it and bounced back. I eased off the throttle and let the truck settle at 55. I clicked the CB to check if anyone else was seeing it. Dead quiet. No chatter, no engine noise in the background. I hadn't passed another rig in 20 minutes. That alone felt off. That corridor usually has at least a few trucks moving through at that hour. The shoulders along that section are rough. Scrub brush, broken fence posts, dips that can swallow a small car. No street lights, just reflectors and the faint glow of exit signs miles apart. I leaned forward in the seat, scanning through the haze. That's when I saw it. At first, it was just a vertical shape on the right shoulder, maybe half a mile ahead. Pale against the darker brush. I figured it was a person in light clothing, maybe a stalled car farther back, maybe someone who ran out of gas and decided to walk. It wouldn't be the first time I'd seen something like that out there. I kept slowing, watching for movement. The shape stayed still until I was closer, maybe 1,000 feet out. Then it shifted. Not a normal step. There was no clear bend at the knees, no swing of arms. It seemed to slide forward a small distance, like someone leaning and dragging their feet at the same time. I rested my hand on the air horn cord and gave a long blast. The sound cut through the fog and rolled back at me. The figure didn't flinch. No raised arm, no turn of the head. It stayed angled toward the road. At around 200 feet, I could make out more detail. The body looked wrong. Too narrow through the chest. Arms hanging longer than they should. The head tilted sharply to one side. Not curious. More like it had settled there and never been straightened. I felt my stomach tighten, but I kept my lane. I drifted slightly left within it to give space, making sure my trailer tires stayed clear of the shoulder. As I came alongside, the figure leaned toward the cab. That's what made me grip the wheel. It didn't lunge. It leaned in, slow, like it was trying to see inside. For about 3 seconds, it matched my speed. I know that because I glanced at the speedometer. 54, 55, steady. The shape stayed level with my passenger window, just off the edge of the road, moving without the bounce of footsteps. Then it was gone. No impact, no sound against the trailer, no scrape or thud. I checked the right mirror first, expecting to see something tumbling in the fog. Nothing but white haze and the faint outline of the shoulder. I checked the convex mirror, then the left side. Empty. My heart was pounding hard enough I could feel it in my throat. I kept driving. Stopping in that stretch at that hour did not feel smart. The fog thinned about 5 miles later, as sudden as it had formed. Clear sky again. Stars back in view. I scanned the road behind me. No headlights. No figure walking in the distance. I told myself it was a trick of light. Fog can distort shapes. A fence post, a piece of plastic caught on wire, a bush bent at an angle. Fatigue can stretch things too. I'd been up since noon the day before. I rolled into the Love's travel stop Gallup around 2:45 a.m. The lot was half full. Sodium lights buzzed overhead. The normal comfort of idling engines and the smell of diesel settled my nerves. I parked near the edge, set the brakes, and stepped down with a flashlight. I walked the front first. Grille was clean. No dents, no scuffs. Headlights intact. I checked the bumper and the lower fairings. Nothing caught underneath. I moved down the passenger side. That's where I saw them. On the passenger door, just below the window and above the handle, there were prints in the dust. 5 long streaks, narrow, spaced wider than a normal hand. They started near the seam of the window and dragged down at a slight angle. The top of the highest mark sat level with the bottom of the window frame. On my truck, that is well over 6 feet from the ground. I crouched and looked for footprints below. The pavement under the door was dry and dusty from the lot, but there were no clear impressions leading up to it. No smears on the step. The mirror housing was clean. The marks were only on the door panel, as if something had reached across from the side and pressed down. I wiped one with my thumb. It smeared like surface grime disturbed by pressure. Not paint, not grease from my own hands. The shape of each mark tapered at the end, almost pointed. I measured against my own hand. My fingers did not span that distance. I stood there for a long time under those lights, listening to engines idle. My cab camera had been recording the road ahead, not the side. I climbed back in and scrolled through the footage. The fog was visible. The right shoulder showed nothing clear. At the moment I passed the spot, there was a brief distortion in the beam pattern of my headlights, like something interrupted the light, but it was too blurred to define. I finished the run that night. I did not mention it to dispatch. I did not take another night load through that stretch for 6 months. When I eventually did, I paid close attention to the mile markers. About where I thought I saw the figure, there was a section of damaged fence and tire tracks leading off into the brush, old and faded. A few weeks after the incident, I searched local reports and found a short article about a pedestrian struck on that highway in early October, near the area I remembered. The person had been walking along the shoulder at night. The description listed him as tall and extremely thin. There was no mention of fog. I still drive nights. I still run I-40. I keep the passenger side camera angled wider now. I wash the doors before every trip so I would notice if something touched the metal again. Nothing like that has happened since. I have gone over every detail enough times to settle on the most likely explanation. A man on foot in low visibility, disoriented or exhausted, moving in a way that looked wrong because of the fog in my headlights. When I passed, he may have stumbled toward the truck and slapped the door as I went by. In the mirrors and the haze, it vanished from view. That explanation fits the road, the hour, the history of that stretch. It fits better than anything else. What does not fit is the height of those prints and the way they ran downward, as if the hand started near the glass and slid lower while keeping pace with a moving rig. I do not think about it when I drive. I focus on the lines and the gauges. But every time I fuel near Gallup, I still walk the passenger side first.